Can you define like language and talking? Like your
How we
words?
talked about it in class.
Yeah.
Language is the experience of speaking language is an act of physical actions, gestures with your articulators that interrupt your airflow, that make sounds that we recognize. And then when those sounds get put in an order that we've agreed on means something, we move forward with like mutual understanding.
Yes.
And then when people disagree on what sounds go where and how to make them and which sound combinations mean the things that we think they mean, and they disagree, then that is the root of everything evil and why there is war.
Yes.
Because we can't agree that
Right.
the sh should follow the v and the shv should be the word,
Right,
or whatever it
right.
is. I mean, that's a really simplistic view.
Right.
But if I let myself go deeper, it does come to things like how we explain the sun
Right.
and how we explain rain. Somebody will say
Cave.
the god Ra pulls the sun up into the sky every
Right.
morning if they were from Egypt. And someone else might say, no, Jesus Christ died and God the Father gives that sun.
Right.
And instead of going, wow, your version of what that is sounds like Jesus Christ, and mine sounds like Ra. But it's the same thing we're talking about. Instead of that, they go, it's not Jesus Christ, it's Ra.
Yeah.
And then they get in fights.
Yeah.
Learning to articulate language, but I think it sometimes should stop there.
Of course, I just
Sometimes.
Shakespeare on your brain.
No, oh my god, I could talk about this all day.
And like even some part of your warm up, like how does it feel to think about Shakespeare? Make that one right now.
This might sound like a horde of feral cats, but believe it or not, this is actually a voice and speech class in New York University's Tisch School of the Arts drama program in the experimental theater wing. You too can get this education for just $100,000 a year! Every first-year drama student takes a voice and speech class. It's pretty common across every drama program in the country. My voice is my instrument, and I need to know how to take care of it. From the outside, it looks like I'm willing to be in debt until I'm 50 just to roll around the floor and hum, but actually we learn a lot about how the voice works. My teacher Doug had us learn all about the anatomy of the voice, resonance, articulation, and lots of other things that made me realize I know absolutely nothing about how my voice works. Then comes the speech part of voice and speech. We were tasked with defining language and speaking, which seems a lot easier than it is. Speaking, it can be anything. Whispering, singing, babbling, whatever. So it's complex. As Doug has defined it, when we put sounds in order, and we as humans agree upon that order, we create a mutual understanding of communication, which becomes language. This means that language is something that is socially constructed and agreed upon, and when we don't agree upon a collection of sounds, we fight about it. Language is entirely political in this way, which in turn makes it the root of war. In that voice and speech class, we tried to find the most accurate description of words and languages. I was immediately reminded of the essay In History by Jamaica Kincaid. In History poses many questions about language as Kincaid wonders where she belongs in history. She touches on Christopher Columbus, who renamed the things in the New World that indigenous people had already named. Kincaid claims that she has no connection to today's words, as Columbus named things in reference to what he already knew, meaning he named things in the context of a white European man. Her historical context helps me understand why and how language evolves and how language is created.
Finding in these new lands people and their things, and these people and their things. He had never heard of them before. And he empties the land of these people. And then he empties the people. He just empties the people. It is when this land is completely empty that I and the people who look like me begin to make an appearance. The food I eat begins to make an appearance. The trees I will see each day come from far away and begin to make an appearance. The sky is as it always was. The sun is as it always was. The water surrounding the land on which I am just making an appearance is as it always was. But these are the only things left from before that man, sailing with his 3 ships, reached the land on which I eventually make an appearance.
As Kincaid puts it, the things of people can only exist if they are spoken or written about. And to Christopher Columbus, the people of the New World did not exist since there were no speakings or writings of them. Language holds identity, and when a language is taken away, a whole world can go with it. This September, I went to see a show at NYU Skirball, as a drama freshman at NYU, of course. Who's going to pass up an $18 ticket to some high-quality theater? The show I saw was Counting and Cracking, which is an intense new play about the Sri Lanka Civil War. I had absolutely no background on the play or its content, but I was enamored by this show. Counting and Cracking tells the story of a family of Tamil Sri Lankans living in Australia, and the protagonist learns about his family's history that he never knew about. He learns that his great-grandfather was a powerful political figure in Sri Lanka at the start of the Civil War, but because his family was Tamil, the minority group, they lost everything to the majority Sinhalese. I found it so interesting that a war that devastated a country for generations was brewed out of language, and the refusal to accept multiple languages as Sri Lanka's national language. Language is deeply rooted in identity, as Kincaid has taught us, and Counting and Cracking demonstrates how the loss of language means the loss of purpose and connection. Eamon Flack, the director and associate writer of Counting and Cracking, has his own statement in the program for the play. He writes about his experience with being part of the creative team for Counting and Cracking while discussing the themes and concepts that the play hopes to celebrate. In his blurb, Flack says,
Counting and Cracking is about the most basic needs we have all to connect. Most of our lives are spent nurturing these connections, love, family, language, the passage of time from one generation to the next.
I find the most compelling part of Flack's statement to be that we spend so much time giving care to language, and it's a human thing to want to care for your language. When a country decides to diminish the power of a language, it is human instinct to want to defend your own. Like Doug's example, if someone were to say, my language was not the way that they described something, the natural reaction is to want to defend my language. Even when we know that fighting is wrong and that we should accept everyone's language, there is that sense of pride that will always remain with someone's first language. I wanted to learn more about the Sri Lanka Civil War. No matter how much information can be put in a 3-hour play, there is always more information to be found. I wanted to know about the perspectives of the Sinhalese, or more of a background on how the government fell so quickly to war. I found this diverse and historically rich lens with Professor Sasanka Pereira in his keynote speech from a language and culture convention. Professor Pereira has taught at many prestigious institutions, such as the Colombo Institute and South Asian University. He has many publications surrounding Sri Lanka, and though he is Sinhalese, he attempts to connect with his Tamil audience as well. His speech, Reflections on Issues of Language in Sri Lanka, Power, Exclusion, and Inclusion, was given on October 24th, 2011. In this speech, he breaks down the need for a Swabhasha, or a national language, in Sri Lanka following the removal of English rule over the country. Professor Pereira explains how there was not always disagreement over which language should be their Swabhasha. In fact, the original plan was for both Tamil and Sinhala to be accepted languages.
The language issue had not become a divisive ethnic issue, even at this stage, as exemplified by the SLFP manifesto, which claimed that it is most essential that Sinhalese and Tamil be adopted as official languages immediately, so that the people of this country may cease to be aliens in their own land.
Language in Sri Lanka is such a fragile concept, but the people were desperate to find some connection, like Eamon Flack says, to each other and their country. By removing the foreign language English, they could fully celebrate Sri Lankan culture. It seems that this is the same way Jamaica Kincaid feels, uncomfortable using the words of Columbus forced onto the New World in place of the indigenous languages. Part of what made me so interested in researching Counting and Cracking was the use of Tamil and Sinhalese in the play. There was like a specific choice made by the production team to not include any kind of captioning. And at first I was thrown off by this choice. I couldn't understand what was happening in many intense arguments and fight scenes. However, this choice created the effect of what the Sri Lankan people would have been going through, because not everyone in the country understood both Tamil or Sinhala. And I began to understand the panic one would feel if it was not required for the people in your country to know your own language, and you would be forced to learn a completely different one in order to survive. I saw another play later in the year called Antigone in the Amazon, also at NYU Scribble. This play was created and directed by Milo Rau and his group NT Ghent, a theater in the Netherlands that creates testimonial theater pieces with only 20% of the text being from a show, while the rest is completely original. Antigone in the Amazon is the Greek tragedy of Antigone told through the landless workers movement in Brazil. The production itself is partially recorded and partially performed live, with some singing or other forms of media brought into the show. The recorded segments follow NT Ghent's process of having the surviving members of the landless workers movement put on their own production of Antigone that is framed around a massacre against them by the government, while the in-person performers either tell their story of working with the production or perform what is also being played on the screen. The movement's title is MST, and they have always worked against the messy and corrupt government in Brazil as inspired by Marxism. In one tragic event, an MST protest along a main road in Brazil was met with government soldiers who shot and killed many of the peaceful protesters. As the events are in Brazil, NT Ghent made the choice to have the production spoken in Portuguese, with a few Dutch actors speaking their own language. Unlike Counting and Cracking, Antigone in the Amazon uses captions, so the audience understands everything the actors on screen and in front of them are saying. Because there is little to no English, I was grateful for the captions. I was able to properly understand what was happening in the show without feeling like a complete outsider. Having the Dutch and Brazilians come into a dialogue together gave the subject of the Brazilian government a global heaviness. I felt the weight of the issues going on in South America and wanted to do something to help. If the play had been told completely in English, I don't think it would have had the same effect. Antigone in the Amazon uses language as an activism tool, while Counting and Cracking utilizes language as an enlightenment tool. Although these different perspectives on language create different meanings, they both allow the audience to better conceptualize what is going on in the world.
And then why do you think we as actors should know that? Why should we?
Because you have a responsibility as a storyteller to make sure that your audience hears what you intend for them to hear. And if you are not a tap dancer, then there's no reason you should be in the front line of a production of 42nd Street.
Exactly.
You can fake it, but we're going to tell you're not a dancer.
Right.
And so if you're faking it in your mouth, we're going to hear it, and we're going to lose your story.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you. Period.
Language is such a normal thing. It's so easy to take it for granted. But who are humans if they do not have language? What is an actor if they do not have text? This very normal part of everyone's life is also a deadly weapon or a tool for healing. I cannot take my words for granted because each one is a piece of me, a piece of my world.
Say hi.
Hi.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Would you like to say hi?
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning.
Good morning, America. Hey, how are you? alright, are you? I am pretty good today. That sounded weird when I said it. I meant it sincerely, but it came out like, fuck you.